All right, let's talk about one of the biggest headaches in modern tech, multi-cloud. If your organization feels like it's drowning in a sea of different cloud services, well, you are definitely in the right place. We are going to map a way out of the chaos.
So, does this question kind of hit close to home for you? You know the scene. One team is all in on AWS, another is spinning up everything in Azure, and maybe a third is experimenting over in Google Cloud. And hey, that's a great sign of innovation, but man, it can get messy and fast.
And that mess, it's not just a feeling, it's very real. It's teams solving the exact same problems over and over again. It's security policies that are totally inconsistent from one cloud to the next. And it's architects spending way more time just untangling knots than they do actually enabling new ideas. It really is a maze, and it just slows everybody down. But don't worry, there is a way out. We're going to walk through a really clear 5-part playbook. First, we'll really define what this maze is. Then we'll find our guiding North Star. After that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of designing the blueprints to navigate it all. Then we'll cover putting that plan into practice. And finally, we'll talk about how to avoid the most common pitfalls along the way.
Okay, first up, let's put a name to the problem: the multi-cloud maze. This is what happens when cloud adoption just sort of grows organically, team by team, without any kind of central strategy. The result? Total chaos, instead of the amazing capability you were promised. So how do we find our way through this thing? Well, the solution, our North Star, is a super powerful concept called reference architectures. I want you to think of this as the main tool we're going to use to bring back some clarity and consistency to our wild multi-cloud world. So what exactly is a reference architecture? Just think of it like an expert guide. It's a pre-vetted, opinionated starting point for a common task. Something like deploying a web application. Its whole job is to free up your teams from having to reinvent the wheel every single time. By handling all those common, complex decisions up front, it just lowers their mental burden, that cognitive load, and lets them focus on building cool stuff, not just configuring it.
And right here, this is an absolutely crucial distinction we have to make. A reference architecture is a guide. It is not a rule. It's not meant to be some rigid bottleneck that just creates friction and slows people down. No way. It's designed to be an accelerator. It's all about enablement, not enforcement.
Let me put it another way. You wouldn't try to build a skyscraper without a blueprint, would you? Of course not. Reference architectures are your pre-approved building blueprints for the cloud. They make sure everything has a solid foundation, that it's secure, and that it meets code. But, and this is key, they don't tell you what color to paint the walls or what style of furniture to buy.
Okay, so the theory is great, but how do we actually create these blueprints so that they're, effective and actually useful? That's what this next section is all about, getting into the design process.
The whole process has to start with a solid foundation. First, and this is so important, focus on what your teams are actually trying to do, their common use cases, not just the latest shiny tech. Second, you have to define your absolute non-negotiables. These are the things that every single system must have, like end-to-end encryption or plugging into your central identity system. And finally, you have to write down every single assumption. If you're assuming a certain network setup is already there, document it. Make the implicit explicit. Now, when it comes to multi-cloud, these design principles are absolutely key. You want to anchor your blueprints on universal ideas, things like object storage or a managed database. Then you provide specific examples of how to do that with, say, AWS S3, Azure Blob Storage, or Google Cloud Storage. But you also have to document the key differences between them. And please, whatever you do, avoid designing for the lowest common denominator. The goal isn't to make every cloud look identical, it's to have a consistent approach while still letting teams use the powerful, unique features of each platform. So what does a finished blueprint actually look like? Well, it's got to be more than just a diagram. You need clear visuals, sure, but you also need a record of why you made certain decisions. We call these architectural decision records, or ADRs. You need practical code snippets to get teams started, like some example infrastructure as code. You should also call out security stuff, and, this is a big one, a section explaining when you should use this pattern, and just as importantly, when you should not use it. Remember, the motto here is clarity over completeness. So creating the blueprints is one thing. Getting people to actually use them, that's a whole different ballgame. This next section is all about adoption and how to put these plans into practice without creating some bureaucratic nightmare. So how do you get people on board with these brilliant blueprints you've made? The key is to realize you can't just publish them and hope for the best. Adoption is all about influence, not top-down mandates. You gotta find enthusiastic teams to be your champions. Run office hours where people can ask questions, tell compelling stories about how these blueprints helped a real project succeed, and maybe most importantly, you have to listen. Create a real channel for the teams on the ground to give you feedback and actually help improve the designs. And this really gets to the heart of the matter. This is the fundamental tension that pretty much every organization has to manage. On one hand, you want your teams to be autonomous and move fast. But on the other, you need just enough alignment to avoid chaos, security risks, and, wasted money. Your reference architectures are the #1 tool for navigating that balance. Look, governance does not have to be a dirty word. It can be super lightweight. Think simple checklists for architecture reviews, have a clear, fast process for when a team really needs an exception to the rule. Version your architectures so everybody knows what's current. Honestly, the best model is a paved road, a smooth, easy path for 80% of what people need to do, but with clearly marked escape hatches for those teams that have a legitimate reason to go off-road. Okay, so we've designed our blueprints and we've got a plan for adoption. Now, how do we make sure this whole effort doesn't just fizzle out in 6 months? Let's talk about the common ways this can fail and how you can ensure long-term success. All right, here are the traps you need to watch out for. Architectures that are too vague, they're useless. But ones that are too specific, they're brittle. Trying to make one single pattern fit every single problem is just a recipe for failure. If nobody officially owns the architecture, it will die. And if you ignore feedback from the people actually building stuff, you can bet they're going to ignore you right back. But the biggest danger of all is that these beautiful documents end up as shelfware, just collecting digital dust somewhere. And to avoid that terrible fate, you have to treat your reference architectures like living products. Give them version numbers, just like code. Have someone whose job it is to track when AWS or Azure releases a new service that could make a pattern better. And you have to be brave enough to officially retire old patterns when they're no longer the best way. And constantly, always, feed the lessons you learn from real production systems back into the blueprints. When you put this all together, this is what it's really all about. This isn't about doing architecture just for the sake of architecture. No. It's about empowering your teams. It's about giving them the confidence to move fast because they know they are standing on a solid, secure, and scalable foundation. That, right there, is the true business value. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Take a hard look at your own organization's approach. Is your architecture a guardrail, something that keeps people safe while they move at speed down the highway? Or is it a gate, something that stops progress and forces everyone to wait around for permission? The answer to that question makes all the difference.